Welcome, aspiring engineers and space pioneers. Do you want to conquer other worlds, create funny coloured bottles, and potentially strand yourself in deep space? Well, today, I'm going to teach you how. Welcome to the world of space platforms, a new feature in Factorio's Space Age expansion. Now, before we can even begin, there are a few key things we have to cover first. The most important of these is the changes to rockets. In Factorio 1.0, you would need 1,000 components to launch a single rocket. Now, you only need 50. Rocket control units have also been replaced with processing units. So while rockets are now a lot cheaper, they are also required in the hundreds, so you'll definitely need a robust supply of these three ingredients. Secondly, we probably need to cover some of the basic materials you're going to need in space. The first thing that you're going to need the most of is space platform, so automate it as early as you can. It will definitely stress your steel system, but luckily, now that you've unlocked space, you can research steel productivity, so do that. Next up is the starter pack. This is going to be the hub of your spaceship, and if it's destroyed, the whole platform goes down with it. But now that we have this, let's launch it into space and see what it does. And wow, look at that. A thing. But in space now. So taking a look around, what are these little rocks floating around smashing into stuff? Well, they're asteroid chunks, specifically oxide, carbonic, and metallic. These will be the only source of resources during spaceflight, so you better learn to love them. So there are two types of space platform. There is a science platform and there is a spaceship platform. Let's start simple and first learn how to make a space science platform. Space science takes one ice, 2 iron plates, and 1 carbon, which happens to be quite easy to make in space. All we need to do is crush the 3 types of asteroids and boom. But how do we actually get these chunks onto belts and in assemblers? Meet the asteroid collector. This little guy will use his grubby little mitts to snag chunks and store them, ready for use. So let's do a pretty simple build and see how we can optimize it. So here is a very simple first platform. We have 3 collectors filtered to only 1 of the types of asteroid chunks, being directly input into a crusher. Then we just belt those finished items to the science assembler and insert that into the hub, which, with a request on the ground in the cargo landing pad, will automatically send those items down to the surface. But this isn't very fast, so let's make it bigger. Now here we can see a slightly larger platform with a few tweaks. More collectors will certainly help, as well as more science assemblers and a lot more belts for storage. So let's turn it on and see what happens. So, while it is currently making science, our belts are looking really full. This is definitely more iron than ice. And new chunks are barely able to be put onto the belts. So let's do a little bit more optimizing here. Let's just put finished products on the inside belt and asteroid chunks on the outside belt. But now, the most obvious problem has occurred. The inside belt is totally full. And while the outside is still filling up with chunks, eventually it's going to become completely full. So how can we fix this? There are many ways of fixing this problem, but circuit conditions is going to be the most efficient way. There are a few ways to do this, but let's go from the top down. How can we limit the amount of items coming in so our belts never clog up? To limit the number of asteroid chunks coming in, we're going to use 3 decider combinators, 1 for each chunk. We will then set them up to where they output the signal of the asteroid if the amount of chunks on the belt is less than 20. We're going to wire all the combinators together. We'll wire all the combinator inputs to the belt on hold all belts. This will then read every single item on the belt and only output a signal when the chunks are less than 20. We'll then wire the outputs together, send that wire into all of our asteroid collectors. We'll then set our collectors to set filter mode so that when the collectors receive a signal from the combinator, the item is added to the filter and will automatically be connected. We'll then copy that setting to all of our collectors. And we've successfully stopped excess items coming in. And in a similar way to asteroid collectors, we'll read the belt contents and only allow the crushers and furnaces to accept items when there is a shortage of their output items, such as iron plates. We'll connect the inserter to the belt. On read belt contents, hold all belts. We will then disable the inserter and change the signal, and we only want to turn on the assembler when the amount of iron plates is less than 30. And what we will do is we will copy this inserter condition to the other inserter and change it for the input inserters into the crushers as well. And now the platform just gets to hum away beautifully. It's never going to clog up and will give us a constant stream of science. But what if we want more than science? What if we want to go, say, to one of the 3 starter planets that we can choose from? Well, let's send up another space platform and see what we need to do to actually get there. So, I've prepared a list of all the things that we could possibly need here up in space, and combine them into a logistics group. Now all we need to do to get all of the materials up there to start is to just check the box, and as much of it will come on its way as possible. And everything has arrived as requested, so let's get started. So when traveling to new planets, there are 2 new things that we will encounter in space. The first is thrust. How do we actually move our space platform? And what happens when the asteroids get bigger and start to throw hands in an attempt to stop our beautiful colonization of the solar system? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start by establishing the collection and processing system. And here we are with our collection system all ready to go. We have our standard asteroid collectors. We have our standard crushing system. But then we also have something that is not so standard. Why do we need ammunition? First off, let's just power this. We'll place down some solar panels, and we'll let the platform slowly buffer up some resources. So we have now buffered up plenty of resources. We've got ammo backing up onto our squealy little belt because containers don't work in space. And according to our combinators, we have plenty of carbon and ice and iron ore floating around on our belts. So now let's take a look at thrusters. Thrusters have a fuel input and an oxidizer input, and they are offset. And I think that's intentional so that you don't just have blocks of thrusters. But the easy way to get them to pass through is just to make a little triangle. 5 thrusters is plenty, and in fact, I'm not sure we'll be able to fulfill all of the fuel requirements. But if we check the Factoriopedia, we can see that providing less fuel will actually increase the efficiency. Fuel and oxidizer are going to be made in chemical plants, and you can never have enough production of this. So let's just place down a lot. Fuel is going to be made with carbon and water. So we'll have 3 chemical plants producing carbon, and oxidizer is iron and water. All things that we can get in space. And since we have ice, we can just melt ice into water in a chemical plant. And suddenly, we've got our fuel production all set up. We need to make sure we connect up our water pipes to our thrusters. We'll also connect all of our fuel and oxidizer outputs, as well as create 2 buffer tanks. So now that everything is plumbed together, let's get our item inputs. So we are going to need iron ore and carbon. And we're going to take those off our sushi belt, as well as taking ice off the sushi belt. And now we're producing fuel and oxidizer ready to be pumped in the thrusters. But if we just pump it straight into the thrusters, we're going to run into an issue. And that is that we're going to consume 200% fuel if we have the thrusters fully saturated with fuel. So, what we can do to stop pumping the thrusters full of fuel is we have a constant combinator outputting a signal of T equals 1. We'll then wire that into a decider combinator. We're going to set the signal for T is less than 60. And we will output the input count. And when we wire that decider combinator back into itself, it creates a timer that pulses every second. And if we take the circuit condition on the red wire into this lamp and set it for when T is greater than 50, then for 10 frames every second, the light will be on. If we set it to 30, the light will pulse every half second. And here's where the magic can happen. If we create a pump and wire it to the decider combinator, set it to enable when T is greater than 50, we will pulse the pump at the same frequency as this light. Then all we have to do is wire in our fuel connection, and while stationary, all the thrusters will fill up, but once this thruster fuel empties out of its inventory, then we will only allow a certain amount of fluids in per pulse. There's no better way of controlling this. You do just have to experiment with whatever your T signal is going to look like. But I found that T being greater than 50 works quite well to get us about 85% efficiency. I found that this gets you about 85% efficiency, which is around 58% of the possible thrust, but only 70% fuel usage. You can tweak that to be less efficient and provide more thrust, but I think efficiency is key when resources are scarce. So now we're good to go, right? We can just set ourselves off to another planet. Wrong. If we do, this will happen. So, before we turn ourselves into a high-velocity missile straight into the surface of a rock, let's add some gun turrets. While moving, asteroids will only come from the top down, so we really only have to worry about the top, so let's just start placing them. We want to make sure our asteroid collectors can still collect asteroids in front of us, so we may have to move them because I don't think this is enough gun. We'll use the trick of inserting ammunition between turrets to make sure all of our turrets are fed. So we have our gun turrets up the front now. We should be good to go. But how do we actually tell the platform where to go? And more importantly, when to go? So for this, we're going to pick Vulcanus as our first target. But we only want to go when we have full fuel, full oxidizer, and enough ammunition to make sure that we can get there without exploding. And here's where circuits are going to be our best friend again. So let's set up 3 combinators. The first condition is going to be for when ammunition is greater than a certain amount. Let's say 150. And we'll first read the outside sushi belt to tell us that there is currently 57 magazines in there. Then we will also read the interior ammunition belt, which has a lot of ammo here. So maybe we can say when it's greater than 300. That'll ensure we can do multiple trips. So, how do we want this to tell the hub when to go? In this case, we'll give it a green signal with an output amount of 1. Next up is going to be our fuel and oxidizer. And get used to seeing wires running everywhere if you don't want to use power poles. So we'll connect a wire to the fuel and we'll just figure out a way to get it up to the combinator. So we can go through here, up to this assembler, through this inserter, and now up to the second combinator, which is currently reading 25,000 fuel, so it's working. Thruster fuel, let's say, is greater than or equal to 20,000, and we'll let it output a green signal, output count 1. Identically will be thrust oxidizer, greater than or equal to 20,000, outputting a green signal of 1. And now we just want to get our red wire down there so we can just bridge it through here. Done, it's set to read contents. Wonderful. Now all 3 green signals are being output. Let's wire the outputs together and send it into the hub. Now, in our launch conditions here, we will make sure that the circuit condition of green is equal to 3. That's how we'll know to go from planet to planet. So we'll also say that for Navis as well, circuit condition green is going to equal 3. Now we will go back and forth only when these combinators are outputting 3 green signals, so 1 each. This will make sure that we never depart with low fuel, low oxidizer, or low ammo. We'll also add some time pass signals here of 120 seconds just to make sure that we have a buffer. And eventually, if we were going to export things, we would want to enable all requests satisfied. But since we aren't going to be requesting anything, and this is just an example ship, let's just not have that and check if this ship will fly. All we have to do is set to automatic thrust and it will take off for Vulcanus. So let's see how it goes. So let's send it off to Vulcanus. So we'll just change that to 30 seconds so we can actually take off. So the first journey away from Navis will start to only have small chunks. But after a while, larger asteroid chunks will spawn. Like this medium asteroid chunk here, which our gun turrets will automatically target and destroy. And as we can see now, our pump has been pulsing the fuel, and so currently we are running at around 82% efficiency. We can see the gun turrets are working just fine. The ammunition on the belt is staying high. We can see that we still have 60 on the outer belt, and a total of 442. And we have safely arrived at Vulcanus, consuming 7,000 fuel and almost all of our oxidizer. Which means now we are currently not outputting the signals that allow the platform to leave. So while we're in orbit around Vulcanus, the platform will rebuild up its buffers and go back when we need it to. And that is how you successfully create your first space platform to take you to another planet. This design will work on all 3 of the inner planets. That is Gleba, Vulcanus, and Fulgora. If you liked what you saw today and you want to see more, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment down below how your first space platform went. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.